Welcome to this Killik Explains finance video. This week, insider trading. And I want to clear up some confusion. There are still people out there who think that insider dealing is a perk of working in the city or knowing someone who does. In fact, it's a criminal offence. So with no more ado, what is it? Well, I'm going to give you a little scenario which we'll be coming back to later in the video to get us started. So, perhaps an innocent sounding scenario. A company director knows his firm will be releasing great results next week and tells his wife over supper one evening the previous week. What happens next? She phones their accountant and asks him to organise a share trade on their behalf. Now, the accountant doesn't know how to deal shares, that's not his job for a living, but he does know someone who does. So the accountant phones his friend, a broker, and the trade is done. The shares are bought, and a week later, when the results are announced, they rise 25%. Is there a problem? Or how many problems have we got? We'll be returning to that scenario shortly. So, what is insider dealing? All right, first of all, it is a criminal offence. So the test in a court of law is described as beyond reasonable doubt. That's roughly speaking 90% or more certainty. It's not a civil offence. With civil offences, the burden of proof is lower. They're easier to nab people for, if you like, because it's described as being convinced on a balance of probabilities. So a jury needs to get beyond reasonable doubt about what? Three things. Number one, an insider is involved. But the confusing thing about insider dealing as a title is the width of the number of people and acts that are covered by the legislation. So an insider is quite a broad definition, as you'll see in a moment. Number two, and all of these need to be passed, price-sensitive information is involved. And number three, it's used in a deal, used to facilitate a deal, a buy or sell in shares, for example, or it's simply passed on. So, beware. Although it's called insider dealing, just by passing on illegal, price-sensitive information, you can be caught. So, who are insiders? Taking those sort of one in turn. First of all, directors or partners are, if you like, primary insiders. They are obviously people who have regular access to price-sensitive information because they're running businesses. And these are businesses, if you think about it, that are subject to information announcement rules and regulations. So they're right in the firing line potentially. Employees, because they have close contact with directors, partners. A shareholder, or anyone connected to an insider. So you get, within the law, quite a tight list, and then suddenly anybody else who can be connected to an insider, a wife, a friend, a broker, doesn't matter. Inside information then, test two, is what? Not publicly available. And there are definitions of this. So for example, listed companies have an obligation to release information to the market at certain times about their results, and they're expected to adhere to that schedule. Number two, price sensitive. So this is information which is expected reasonably to move a share price up or down. People sometimes think insider trading is all about getting in early to make a profit, but it can also be about getting out early to avoid a loss. Have a think about that one. Number three, there is an intention to make a profit or avoid a loss. So the guilty mind, as lawyers call it, comes into this. You think, I'm going to use that information to make money or avoid taking a hit. Now let's go back to the problem then. How many insiders have we got? Have we got insider trading going on? And I would argue that if these people aren't careful, you've got 4 insider traders on this screen, at least. All right? Because a company director is a primary insider. All right, and this is likely to be price-sensitive information. And what he's done is pass it on. Now, you might say he's passed it on to his wife. We've got to be very, very careful about doing exactly that kind of thing if there is a possibility that his wife will go and deal using that information, or worse, he actually instructs his wife to go and deal, thinking, well, it's not me doing the deal, it's her, so that's all right. No, it isn't. She is connected to an insider, phones their accountant, who's also potentially connected to an insider, and asks him to buy some shares on their behalf. Well, there's basically passing on the information, hoping someone will use it to your benefit. He phones his friend a broker, passes it on again, and the deal is done. Now, whether the broker, for example, is an insider is open to some debate. You'd need to know more. But I would say potentially you have 4 insiders here, whereas a lot of people would say, well, hang on a minute, haven't you only got one? It's just this guy's the problem, isn't it? Well, he's the start of the problem, but the trail goes out quite a lot wider. And that's the point about insider dealing. You don't have to be an insider and you don't have to deal to be prosecuted, ironically enough. Now, if you're accused of this, you need some defences, you need an argument up your sleeve if you like. There are some defences. The trade would have occurred at the time it did anyway, i.e. without inside information. So sometimes directors trade because they need to raise money. They'll sell shares to pay a tax bill or school fees, for argument's sake. If they can prove that, fine. Reasonably assume the information was already in the public domain. Information which is in the public domain doesn't count. So for example, you're on a train, you look out the window, you see a factory on fire. You think, oh crikey, I know the business that runs that factory. You phone your broker, say dump all my stock in that company. All right, you dump your stock, the share price subsequently plunges. Is that insider dealing? No, because anybody in theory could have seen that the factory was on fire and worked it all out. You just happened to be first. That's different. Did not expect the information to be price sensitive. If you can prove it. Did not expect the recipient to deal. Now, clearly, directors pass information on to other directors, partners talk to other partners, employees talk to each other, provided they're doing it in the course of their employment. You can say it's not insider trading. Otherwise, company directors couldn't share information with anybody, which would clearly be silly. But does a company director need to share information with his wife, even if it's natural to want to do so after a hard day in the office? No, would be the court's argument. So be careful. Equally, going down the pub and telling your friends? No. Penalties are quite severe. Up to 7 years in prison. It's not easy to prove. It's a criminal offence. Beyond reasonable doubt is a high hurdle. 7 years in prison, or an unlimited fine. A lot of people are quite surprised by that. Whoa, you know, or both, for undermining public markets. And those penalties could be applied to almost anyone in my original chain, by the way. So there you have it. A little bit of a warning. Insider dealing, criminal offence, definitely not a perk. Any questions? To the usual place, please.